at some point, I'm going to be so presidential that you people will be so bored.
Republican frontrunner Donald Trump having fun with all the talk about his need to project a more serious image. And it's time now for our Sunday group. Gerald Seib of the Wall Street Journal, Susan Page from USA Today, Ben Domenech, co-founder of the web magazine The Federalist, and Fox News political analyst Juan Williams, author of the new book, We the People. Well, we ask you for questions for the panel, and we got a bunch on this question of a possible Trump makeover. Madeline Mullenix sent this on Facebook. Trump might act more presidential, but that's what it would be, an act. And Lori tweeted this: will the real Donald Trump please stand up and face the people? Jerry, how do you answer them? Should Trump try to change his image? Can he change his image?
Well, you know, it's not just the handlers who are saying it. We had an interview with Donald Trump this week, and he said, you know I need to be more disciplined. I know I need to adjust. The campaign's adjusting. I'm going to because, and this was his reasoning, I'm not going to blow it. But he also said, you know, when I show up at a big rally with 20,000 people, they're basically looking for me to entertain them, and I'm not going to let them down. So he's having, you know, every politician tries to have it both ways. You know that, Chris. This is him trying to have it both ways. I'm going to be the entertainer at a rally, but I'm going to be presidential when I'm not at a rally. The problem is those two things collide at some point.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Can you do that? Can you be...
We're having this conversation. It's hard to do that, right?
Yeah. Speaking of which, there was a very interesting editorial in the Washington Post today, and let me put it up here. You're not going to be able to read it, but I'll read you the headline. Remember the real Donald Trump. His pivot to a presidential demeanor cannot erase history. And as you can see, it goes on at great length, and it talks about, remember Donald Trump's comments about illegal immigrants being rapists and criminals. Remember Donald Trump's comments that John McCain is not a real war hero. And it says, no matter what his handlers try to make him, don't forget that. Susan, which raises the question, is a makeover of Donald Trump's persona, his image, possible in this 24/7 world of news and social media?
Well, I think two questions. One, no one else will let him forget it, right? Hillary Clinton yesterday put out a video with some of Trump's more provocative statements. Certainly, if she's the nominee, we're going to hear a lot about it. Also, I have questions about whether Donald Trump can remake himself. You know, we saw him Tuesday night look more presidential, talking about Senator Cruz, but Wednesday at his rally, he was back to Lion Ted, as you pointed out in your interview, and that is, I think we know who the real Donald Trump is, and I think he is he's irrepressible. But, you know, I thought the most interesting line in that Post editorial, which was meant to be very critical of Donald Trump, was a quote they included from Reince Priebus, the RNC chairman, that said, winning is the antidote to a lot of things. And I think that's also true when it comes to Donald Trump.
But I guess the question becomes, because you look at his numbers, his unfavorables, and they're sky high, unprecedentedly high for a major party nominee, can you win if he stays in this Donald Trump? And you know, I mean, there are a couple of questions. One, can he win as this Donald Trump? Two, can he become another Donald Trump? And will the new Donald Trump make people forget?
So he can't be elected with these unfavorables, except he's running against somebody, we think, who has unfavorables that are only a little bit lower. Both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton have unfavorable ratings over 50%. We've never had that situation with a candidate in either party. This year we're going to have it, we think, in both parties. So in that way, it makes the train it makes you a little less confident in saying, oh, there's absolutely no way he could be elected.
As I discussed with Paul Manafort, Trump's comments about North Carolina's new law restricting bathrooms in the case of transgender people created quite a backlash, and Ted Cruz saw an opening. Here he is.
He thought that men should be able to go into the girls' bathroom if they want to. Have we gone stark raving nuts?
Ben, is this issue, which obviously Cruz sees as an opening, is this a good issue for Republicans in the primaries, and is it a good issue for Republicans in the general election?
Well, first off, within the context of the discussion about bathrooms, keep in mind there are fewer transgender people in America, according to the best estimates that we have, than there are registered sex offenders. And in this case, I think that's actually the thing that people are concerned about. They're less concerned about transgender people coming into bathrooms than they are men using this as a way to get into locker rooms with women and to exploit that opportunity to to participate in some kind of criminal act. I think that's something that is a concern among a lot of Americans. The polls generally show that favoring, sort of these types of policies has actually increased since this debate has started. On the side of Trump, I think that this is just part of the piece of what we've seen in the past. A month ago, after he ran the table in Florida, in Missouri, in Illinois, and in North Carolina, there was all this talk about he's going to shift to being more presidential, and instead he embarked on a series of gaffes and own goals that undermined his own ability to coalesce and to unite the party. What we've seen over the past week since he won in New York is, again, reverting to these personalized attacks, calling for weakening the pro-life plank of the party, getting to the left of Hillary Clinton on transgender issues, coming out in favor of raising taxes, insulting his opponent's names, and coming out again just the other day and suggesting, in spite of all of the legal decisions that have gone against it, that Ted Cruz is not going to be a qualified candidate for the presidency because he's not a naturalized citizen. This is not someone who is interested in uniting the party, and if it's so easy to be presidential, why doesn't he try it for 5 minutes?
Wow. Well, that was pretty tough. I want to go back, though, to this issue of the bathrooms and whether it's a good issue, because we actually decided to try to find out whether it is a public safety issue, whether it is a problem with transgender people misusing bathrooms to prey on others. And here's what the fact-checking group PolitiFact found. That's that PolitiFact, haven't found any instance of criminals convicted of using transgender protections as cover in the United States. Neither have any left-wing groups or right-wing groups, which brings me to Charles Krauthammer's comment, which I was quoting to Paul Manafort earlier, which is this seems to be a solution in search of a problem.
Well, I think that's right, because in fact, one of the police chiefs in North Carolina said that he'd been in the police force 40 years, he'd never dealt with this issue. So he said, it was as if people are creating a problem in search of a solution. I think what we come back to is a wedge issue here. A wedge issue that, in terms of gay rights, gay marriage, as you know, has been controversial, but that wedge issue, it worked in 2004. If you recall, the Bush campaign got gay marriage on the ballot, helped President Bush gain re-election in 2004. This time, that issue, in terms of the polling, just doesn't have the same power, the same strength on the electorate. And when you look at the reality of it, people say, well, gosh, at home, I use the same bathroom as my wife. In college, they have same-sex bathrooms. This does not seem to be a crying issue. But even in terms of the evangelical community, the power of the true conservatives, which is what I think Cruz is trying to do by countering Trump on this issue, it just doesn't seem to carry the day. It does not seem to have the power, Chris.
I want to shift the question a little bit, Jerry. After Trump's sweeping victory in New York, getting over 60% of the vote, over 90% of the delegates, that was one case where the rules worked in his favor. Did the ground shift inside the Republican establishment? Is there a growing acceptance or at least growing resignation to the fact that Trump is going to be the nominee?
I think so. I think you could almost feel it Tuesday night as the results came in from New York. It went from, well, maybe it's not going to work out this way to, oh my gosh, it really is going to work out this way. The math didn't tell you that. The perception in the party told you that had been a change. And I think you saw it at the RNC meeting in Florida this week, where instead of fighting the trend, there was more, can we come to terms with this Trump trend? And I think that's a significant difference. I'll tell you why it matters, Chris. It matters because if you create an air of inevitability, and that's, I think, what the Trump campaign is trying to do here, that's what you saw Paul Manafort doing, then it becomes easier to get unbound delegates that get you over 1273 to come your way because they're saying it's inevitable, we'll go with the flow. And if you create that perception, you then create the reality, or at least you can.
Let me just quickly say, to sum this up, that Manafort was talking about getting to 1237 by the end of the primaries on June 7th, but in fact there are 41 days, almost 6 weeks, between the end of California and the primaries in Cleveland. That's a long time to try to get some of those unpledged delegates. All right, we're going to take a break here, but we'll see you all a little later.